15 accountants crumbled, but the desperate delivery girl whispered, "Don T, sign this." At midnight, the clock struck 12 in the dimly lit office of Henson Shore, casting long shadows over the desks piled high with financial reports. The faint hum of the overhead lights threatened to drown out the sound of frantic whispers. 15 accountants, once calm and collected, now appeared as fragile as the papers flying from their grasp, their eyes wide with disbelief. Each face was a canvas of shock, their mouths forming silent cries for help that echoed in the stillness. What had driven them to this moment of chaos? The atmosphere was charged. A thick tension hung in the air like a storm cloud, ready to burst. In the corner, a delivery girl named Mara stood, her heart racing as she clutched an envelope that seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent lights. She had only been there to drop off a few packages, never expecting her presence would ignite such panic. But the way the accountants shifted nervously, darting glances at one another, showed something deeply unsettling was in play. It was as if the weight of 1,000 financial burdens pressed down on them. And suddenly, she realized this was more than just numbers. Mara's fingers trembled as she approached the group, urgency pushing her forward. She had overheard snippets of their hushed conversations. Words like sabotage and irrevocable. They spoke about an agreement, something sinister lurking beneath the surface, something that could destroy lives. As she drew nearer, a chilling thought raced through her mind. They were about to make a monumental mistake. "Don't sign this," she whispered, her voice barely rising above a breath yet cutting through the fear like a knife. All eyes turned towards her, shock rippling through the accountants. They looked at her as if she had just conjured a ghost in the room, and for a brief moment, silence enveloped them, thick enough to cut. Mara felt a lump forming in her throat, dread mixing with the desperate need to save them. But their gazes merely widened as they exchanged glances. Fear turned to impatience. One of them, a man with salt and pepper hair and a weary smile that cracked under the pressure, finally broke the silence. "And who are you to tell us what to do?" he scoffed, but she could see the flicker of doubt in his eyes. It was a tiny crack, yet it told her they were not entirely lost. "Before we continue, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon, and while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect." The moment hung in the balance, a pulse between panic and hope. The accountants were now exchanging frantic glances, and Mara felt the weight of their uncertainty. But she knew something else was coming. Just outside, the night continued, unknowing, with cars rolling by a world unaware that inside this office, destinies were ready to shift. As they deliberated, a phone rang, cutting through the tension like a scream. It was an unseen threat, waiting just outside, a growing storm that would soon batter the fragile walls of their money-driven lives. Would they listen to her warning, or fall victim to whatever disaster loomed ahead? Mara held her breath, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet, while the accountants gathered their courage to decide. What would they do next? Would they protect themselves, or would their arrogance lead them blindly into peril? The air crackled with uncertainty, and the only sound left was the steady beat of her heart, echoing a question that hung heavy in the air. The ringing phone silenced the uneasy gathering, pulling each accountant's gaze, including Mara's, to its source. The sound was jarring, invasive. They all strained to hear the muffled voice drifting through the receiver, sharp words delivering the threat that loomed just outside their office walls. The second the voice cut off, panic returned, threading through the accountants like a live wire. What was that about? A young accountant named Gina blurted, her brow furrowed, fingers gripping the edge of her desk. The room tensed as they exchanged furtive looks, their disbelief teetering between skepticism and newfound fear. "Maybe it's nothing," one accountant started, his voice trailing off as if even uttering such a thought could summon danger. Mara could see the hesitation creep over their faces. Doubt saturated the air, heavy and potent. She steeled herself, stepping further into the spotlight, compelled to confront their tension. "No, this is serious," Mara insisted, her voice sharper now, cutting through the lingering hesitance. "I overheard them talking on my delivery rounds. Whoever's behind this agreement, they're playing you. You're being set up." The salt and pepper man shifted uneasily, as if the truth was too close to reach. Another accountant, Joan, pale yet resolute, stepped forward. "And why should we believe you?" she demanded, an edge of fear cracking her voice. "Because the moment you sign that document, you lose everything," Mara replied, each word charged with urgency. "You're signing away your futures without even knowing what it entails. You think it's just paperwork." But a loud crash from outside interrupted her. The front glass door smashed, a gritty sound echoing in the hollow space of the office. Mara jumped, heart racing, her skin prickling with shock. Adrenaline surged through her as the accountants rushed to the windows, peering through the flimsy blinds now barely hanging on. Outside, a figure dashed down the street, cloaked in shadows, their presence like a dark harbinger of the chaos unfolding. "Get back!" the salt and pepper man shouted, his voice laced with fear and authority. They stepped away from the windows, faces drained of color as disbelief cracked back into panic. The reality of their situation clawed at them, the chaos just outside mirroring the turmoil in their hearts. "Now you see," Mara pressed, her hands trembling but resolute. "They're coming for you. Don't let them get their hands on your signatures." "But what can we do?" Another voice quivered, equal parts fear and confusion creeping in. Mara could see doubt etched on their faces, hearts caught between the safety of ignorance and the dread of truth. They were a flock of geese in a storm, unable to recognize the predator waiting for a chance to strike as their eyes flickered back to her. Questions swirled around them like a tempest. But it was the man at the edge of the group, sharp wrinkles deepening on his forehead, who finally spoke. "If we don't sign, what then?" The silence that followed weighed heavy. The loss they could face was a shadow behind their already weary eyes, and the fear of the unknown created a palpable tension. "We fight," Mara stated, voice steady with resolve. "But you have to trust me. We need to band together." From the corner, a flicker of resolve ignited among the group, a sense of urgency spurred on by the scattered chaos outside. But Mara knew that time was running out. The danger was closer than it appeared. She felt the weariness in the air shift as they contemplated their next move. What lay ahead could either save them or send them spiraling into a chaos they could never escape. Mara's heart raced as the conflict rose. What decision would they make, and would it be too late? Just then, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket, a notification that felt like a warning bell. The moment had come to decide, but what awaited them beyond that hesitation? Mara's pulse thudded in her ears, drowning out the panicked murmurs of her colleagues. The phone buzzed again, and she couldn't ignore it. The text message pulsed on the screen. "They're already here." A shiver raced down her spine. "Listen," Mara announced, her voice breaking through their murmured confusion. "The message I just got, it's not good. We have to move now." They looked at her, uncertainty written all over their faces. Gina's fingers trembled. She was the youngest, fresh out of school, and likely the most vulnerable. "Move where?" she whispered, her voice wavering. "To the back entrance. It's clear for now. We can regroup and think. But we have to stick together or none of us will make it." One of the older accountants, a man named Stan, took a hesitant step toward the hallway. "Fine, but we should grab the documents. Just in case." His voice dropped, filled with an urgency tinged with desperation. "No. We need to leave the documents. They want you to sign them. That's the trap." Mara's eyes darted toward the window as a shadow flitted by, fear gnawing at her insides. She felt it then, the tightening grip of dread. "Are you sure we can trust you?" Joan's voice shook, hovering between defiance and fear. How could she, a mere delivery girl, be their savior? "Trust is all we have right now," Mara snapped. "Do you want to end up as a pawn in their game?" The words hung heavy in the air. The silence that followed felt like a solid wall, pressing on them. Then, without warning, the front door creaked open. A gust of wind sent papers flying from desks like frantic birds. They all turned, breath caught in their throats as a silhouette stepped inside, blade glinting in the dim light. A tall figure clad in dark clothing stood framed in the doorway, exuding an ominous energy that made their blood run cold. "Don't move," the figure commanded, voice low and menacing. The accountants froze, eyes wide with the sudden rush of terror that flooded the room. Mara felt the heat of a sudden surge of adrenaline. "Run!" she yelled. She bolted towards the back corridor, the others tumbling after her in a cacophony of snatched breaths and desperate footsteps. They skidded past the break room, scattering coffee cups and a half-eaten donut. The figure cursed behind them, his footsteps pounding with a furious urgency. Mara glanced back, catching sight of the shadow leaping over the desks, a predator honing in on trembling prey. "Quick! Down here!" Mara turned sharply into the supply closet. "Everyone in!" She pushed the door wide open, ushering the accountants inside. "We can't let him see us." "Not now." They crammed together, chest to chest, hearts racing, breaths shallow. As the figure's footsteps grew closer, Mara could feel the weight of their fear, their shared panic flooding the small space. She saw Jonas' lips move silently, praying, while Stan held his breath, eyes darting. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted as the figure entered the office. "Where are you?" he taunted, his voice slicing through the tension like a knife. The sound of his footsteps echoed ominously, sending shivers down her spine. Mara dared not breathe, not when everything could unravel in an instant. She felt the accountant's fingers dig anxiously into her arm, a shared connection of dread anchoring them in that dark corner. Time stretched, each second dragging forth fear that twisted like a coiled serpent in her stomach. Just when it seemed they would be discovered, silence fell over the room, thick and suffocating. Then, in the stillness, there was a loud bang from the front of the office. The figure cursed again, a growl of frustration. "They're here," he shouted. "You think you can escape?" Mara strained to hear the next movements unfolding outside. The tension in the dark closet grew unbearable, every person within stifling their gasps. Hearts racing as steeled anticipation marshaled their thoughts. "Are we going to make it?" whispered Gina, voice quaking, shattering the silence. Mara swallowed hard, her thoughts racing. "We'll make it, but we need to be ready. Ready for anything." The sound of footsteps approached, and the door creaked open slightly. A beam of light sliced through the small gap. They were caught, but the glimpse of salvation flickered just beyond the dark. Would they escape the chaos circling them, or would they succumb to the shadows threatening to consume them? Mara felt her heart pounding like a drum in her chest, each beat a reminder of the danger just beyond the door. The beam of light cut into the cramped space, revealing the pale faces of her colleagues. They all held their breath, frozen under the weight of fear. "Stay quiet," she mouthed, her hands gripping Gina's shoulder as if it could steady the girl's racing pulse. The faint sound of heavy footsteps echoed outside, grinding against the floor with a relentless rhythm. "Don't you dare move," hissed Stan, his voice trembling as he struggled to maintain control. Mara could hear the hitch in his breath. Even the bravest among them felt the cold fingers of terror creeping up their spines. "Mara," Joan whispered urgently. "What now?" The question hung thick in the air. They were out of options, stuck in a small closet, trapped like animals waiting for the slaughter. But Mara couldn't show her fear. "We wait," she replied, though inside, her mind raced. She had to devise a plan, their survival depended on it. Suddenly, a heavy thud reverberated through the office, making everyone jump. The shadow passed the door, a hulking figure hunting their scent. "They're just playing hide and seek," the voice taunted, dripping with malice. "You think you can hide forever?" Mara's heart sank deeper. They weren't just after documents. They wanted her. She was the only one who had seen too much, the girl who shouldn't have been there, a mere bystander in their dark game. Just then, another crash resonated, startling them. "Doesn't matter if you hide," I'll find you. Gina whimpered softly, her voice a fragile thread. What if we get caught? I can't. Mara grabbed her hand, feeling the warmth but also the tremors of fear racking the girl's body. Listen to me. We can't panic. We have to stick together. Gina nodded, but her wide eyes reflected doubt. Mara turned back toward the door, the beam of light flickering ominously. The footsteps were prowling, circling hungry and relentless. She felt a surge of resolve. If he finds us, we fight back. No surrender, she whispered fiercely. We can't give in. They all nodded, hearts synchronized in a fragile bond of courage. A moment later, the door creaked open wider, splintering their sanctuary. The figure loomed in the doorway, darkness swallowing the edges of his form. The glint of the blade shimmered in the dim light, sharp and foreboding. Peekaboo, he crooned, voice dripping with mockery. You think hiding will save you? You're just delaying the inevitable. Mara's pulse quickened. She couldn't let fear overpower her. Now, she shouted suddenly, surging forward. The door swung open, the beam of light flooding their hiding place. They burst out of the closet, pushing against the figure, their collective energy channeling the fight for life. Mara felt the adrenaline surge as chaos erupted. Papers flew through the air like confetti, each one a symbol of what was at stake. From the corner of her eye, she saw a narrow window at the end of the hall. That way, she yelled, pushing the others toward it. Urgency filled their movements, scattering panic like leaves in the wind. The figure roared, lunging forward, but with sheer determination, they surged past him. Mara's mind raced. 5 accountants, 1 desperate girl, pushing through a world teetering on the edge of chaos. The window glimmered like hope, but the figure was on their heels. Would they make it out alive, or had they just run into a trap? Gina stumbled, but Joan caught her. Go, go, go! They reached the window, frantically trying to open it, minds racing. Could they slip through before the predator caught up? As Mara strained against the frame, she heard him behind them, a low, guttural growl. You 1T escaped this time. With one final, desperate push, the window gave way, but just as they squeezed through, Mara felt a cold touch grip her ankle. Help! She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the night. The rest of her team moved instinctively, dragging her free as the figure shrieked in frustration. But as they landed on the ground outside, panting and gasping for breath, Mara couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Where do we go now? Stan wheezed, surveying their dark surroundings, confusion swirling in his eyes as Mara looked up into the night. Shadows danced around them, and she realized the game was only beginning. Would they stand together against what awaited, or would fear tear them apart? The cold air hit Mara like a brick wall, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere they just escaped. As they huddled in the darkness, trees swayed ominously around them, branches scratching like desperate fingers. Run! Mara shouted, pointing toward the dimly lit street just a few yards away. But doubt flickered in her colleagues' eyes, as if they were suddenly stuck in molasses, unwilling to move. Are you crazy? Stan gasped, panic creeping into his voice. That guy back there, he's got a knife. The memory of the blade glinting in the shadows rushed back to her, but the sense of urgency overpowered her fear. If we stay here, we're dead. We need to make it to the road. Gina trembled beside her, clenching her fists as if they could somehow hold back the terror. What if he follows us? He will, Joan interjected, her breath coming in quick bursts. But we have to risk it. We have to keep moving. Mara felt the ground vibrating beneath her feet. He was still out there, prowling like a predator. She could almost see the cruel smile on his face, hear the manic laughter echoing in her head. We have to trust each other, she said, her voice rising above the fear. On 3. 1, 2, 3. They charged forward, adrenaline propelling them into the night. The streetlights flickered as they sprinted to the end of the alley. Shadows darted behind them, their collective breaths mingling with the rush of their pounding hearts. As they rounded the corner, Joan suddenly tripped over a crack in the pavement, sending them all stumbling. Mara's heart dropped as she turned. Joan! Before she could grab her, a hulking figure emerged from the darkness, his presence like a storm cloud. The threat was real, tangible, his intentions clear as he stepped into the light. Too slow, he purred, knife gleaming wickedly under the streetlights. Run! Mara screamed, and without thinking, she lunged at the figure, desperation fueling her instinct to protect her friends. The shock caught him off guard, stumbling back slightly as she shoved him. For a split second, they locked eyes, hers filled with defiance, his with surprise. Then she turned, grabbing Joan by the arm, pulling her upright. Keep moving! As they sprinted, they could hear his footsteps pounding after them, echoing like the countdown of a doom clock. Stan and Gina stumbled along behind her, fear igniting the need to escape. They reached the end of the street, and Mara could see the distant glow of headlights. That way, someone might help. Thick darkness loomed ahead, but there was no time to weigh the dangers. They were running like they were being chased by hell itself, desperation aflame igniting their way forward. But before they could reach the road, the figure cut across, blocking their path with malevolent glee. Nice of you to come out and play. In that moment the group stopped, hearts racing, adrenaline crashing. Would they fight again, or would fear paralyze them? What do we do? Stan panted, eyes wide, a mixture of fight and flight amplifying the panic. Together, Mara shouted, locking her eyes on the figure. The blade in his hand glimmered with hatred, but as long as they stood as one, he couldn't tear them apart. Then, as if the universe dared them to prove their strength, the ground beneath them started to rumble. A nearby car roared to life, lights flashing, an odd savior passing by in the night. Hope surged anew, but it was all or nothing. On my count, just before Mara could unleash the plan swelling in her heart, the figure lunged forward, his sole focus razor-sharp. Now, they surged forward, ready to risk it all in one final act. Would fate offer them salvation or snatch it away? As they collided with the figure, shadows twisted in the night. But with the chaos surrounding them, the real question loomed. Had they just fallen deeper into the trap, or had they turned the tide? The collision sent shockwaves through Mara's body. She felt hard muscle and raw intent, the figure teetering slightly as he fought to regain his balance. No time to think. Mara's instincts kicked in, pushing her forward, adrenaline flooding her veins like fire. Go! She shouted again, her voice sharper than the knife. Stan's hands gripped Mara's shoulder, desperate to pull her back, but her energy was contagious, igniting a flicker of resolve. He glanced behind, pulse racing as a scream echoed in the distance, a reminder of the threat that lurked behind, followed by more hurried footsteps. Joan, still shaken, found her voice. This way. She darted to the left where dim light pooled against the abandoned storefronts. We can cut through the alley. The group followed, hearts pounding in sync, every step fueled by fear and urgency. Shadows stretched around them like reaching hands. They gained a few precious seconds, but every second felt borrowed, like a twist in a cruel game. As they turned, Mara risked a glance back. The figure had recovered, the leer on his face twisted into a mask of rage. You can't run forever, he bellowed, his voice rumbling like distant thunder rolling through the sky. The alley opened up into a hollow courtyard. Mara skidded to a halt. The walls were closing in, shadows pooling together. She could almost taste the suffocating dread in the air. What now? Gina was struggling to catch her breath. There was no way out. There was no answer. Only the sound of their hastened breaths and the looming danger behind them. Mara spotted a fire escape ladder directly above 2 stories up, but it was their only hope. Climb, she commanded, pulling herself onto the bottom rung, the cold metal biting into her palms. Stan and Gina followed quickly, urgency overshadowed by terror. Joan lifted her gaze, navigating the ascent awkwardly. Mara glanced back again. Time was spiraling into chaos as the figure slammed into the entrance of the alley. A silhouette of menace silhouetted against the faint light. What's the matter? He taunted, voice mocking. Thought you wanted to play? Mara's fingers fumbled against the rungs, threads of panic weaving through her mind. The ladder wobbled under their weight, pulling at her focus. They needed to reach the roof. As Stan grunted his way up, Mara's foot slipped, and for a heartbeat, she paused, thoughts tumbling into each other. Just as she regained her hold, the figure took a step forward. "You think you can get away, Mara?" Joan shouted, frozen in fear just below. "Come on," she urged, adrenaline roaring louder than her own heartbeat. Suddenly, the knife glinted under the streetlight as he took another step. A flicker of movement caught Mara's eye, a loose brick wedged in the wall. "Throw it," she yelled, her voice cracking. Stan snatched up the brick, heart racing as he launched it down at the figure. It struck his shoulder with a sickening thud, making him stagger back and giving them precious seconds. "Now," Joan yelled, her voice suddenly confident, as she propelled herself upward, reaching for the next rung while Stan scrambled behind her. As Mara pulled herself onto the landing, her pulse thundered in her ears. They could hear him cursing as he regained balance, rage fueling him. "Quick, find something," Mara urged, frantically scanning the rooftop littered with debris. A rusty metal pipe lay discarded nearby. "Here." Joan gripped it tightly, determination igniting her eyes. "I can use this." They huddled together, adrenaline pulsing through them as they braced for his arrival. But would this be enough to stop him? Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from below, shaking the ground. Startled, their hearts sank. The figure had found another way too easily. "What was that?" Stan whispered, eyes wide. Fear painted across every line of his face. Mara's stomach dropped. They were out of options. The moment was now, the confrontation was imminent. At that moment, the realization struck. They weren't just playing with their survival. They were risking everything against something darker. Then the trap began to tighten. Would this be their last stand or the spark of their fight for freedom? As the figure's shadow loomed larger in the doorway, Mara knew they had to brace themselves for whatever came next. The metal pipe felt cold and heavy in Joan's hands, a lifeline wrapped in rust and desperation. The doorway groaned as the figure slammed against it again, hunger and fury radiating off him like heat from a fire. Each crash echoed like a drumbeat, counting down their last moments. "Whatever happens, don't let him get close," Mara shouted, her voice barely piercing through the fog of their fear. Stan tightened his grip on the edge of the roof, muscles tensed as if preparing to spring. "We can't let him up here. Then we make sure he doesn't." Mara's heart was pounding in her throat, but the resolve held steady as they formed a wall of defiance. Joan stepped forward, pipe raised, her hands shaking but her resolve fierce. "I'll do it. I won't let him hurt any of you." The sound of grinding metal echoed as the figure shifted weight, relentless and deceptive. "You think that rusty stick is going to save you?" His laughter was low, cruel, cutting through the tension like a knife. "I'll crush you all." Stan's eyes darted between the entrance and Joan. They were cornered animals now. "Get ready," he warned, muscles coiling in anticipation. Mara's chest tightened. She scanned the rooftop for anything that might help them. But it was only the moonlight casting shadows on the debris that filled her sight. They were out of options, out of time. Suddenly, a rattle vibrated through the air, something crashing behind them. "What was that?" Joan asked, eyes wide as she peered nervously over her shoulder, the pipe faltering slightly in her grasp. "Stay focused," Mara hissed, determined to pull them back from the precipice of panic. "Look, we have to make a stand." "Yes, coming." They could hear the scuff of shoes on gravel below, taunting them. The figure was regaining his footing. "You ready for this, little girl?" he called, voice dripping with menace. "You didn't just think you could climb away, did you?" The threat ignited a surge of adrenaline. With a shared glance, they squared their shoulders, a quiet understanding weaving between them. This was their moment, their fight. Mara took a breath, her voice breaking the heavy silence. "Joan, just hit him if he gets close." Just as Joan nodded, a final crash sent a wave of dread rippling through them. The figure lunged into the alley, a wild spark of motion, throwing himself toward the base of the ladder. "Now!" Stan shouted, and time crunched into a tight spiral. Joan swung the pipe towards the entrance. The metal clanged against brick with a sickening thud, sending out a shockwave of musty air. But the figure wasn't deterred. He lunged upward, rage fueling him. Gripping the edge of the roof tighter, Mara felt the world tilt on its axis. The shadow loomed closer, and in that instant, she saw something flash in his hand, something sharp. Panic seized her throat. No! Without thinking, Mara dove forward, the ground rushing up below her as she tackled Joan aside, both of them rolling away from the edge. The figure's howl pierced the night. The moment hung suspended as they hit the ground, breathless and desperate. But as the dust settled, the figure was momentarily off balance, crashing into the wall behind them. "Get up!" Stan shouted, urgency dripping from his tone. Another howl of anger erupted as the figure straightened, redoubling his charge. Instinct kicked hard. Joan found herself scrambling to her feet, pipe raised once more. Back away. As if moving in slow motion, Mara turned and ran. They needed to create space to regroup. But as she stumbled backward, her foot caught on a broken shard of brick, and she felt herself teetering again. "Mara!" Stan reached out, eyes wide with fear. All at once, the figure was rising, knife prepared. Time stretched until it felt like eternity. Then came the breakthrough moment. Something in the environment shifted, the world's horror framing their unavoidable fate. In that moment of confusion and despair, the lights flickered in the distance, illuminating the chaos, casting long shadows across their path. "Help us!" Mara screamed, hope and desperation colliding. And in the silence that followed, they heard another sound: sirens. Would it be their salvation or their doom? Suspense twisted like a knife as they clung to the moment, knowing they had no choice but to face what was coming. Would salvation find them, or would shadows claim them all? Mara's heart hammered in her chest, the sound drowning out everything else. Sirens wailed closer, but that glimmer of hope was swallowed by the figure rising, menacing and merciless, advancing with a dancerous grace despite the chaos unfolding. "Joan, get to the ladder!" Stan shouted, urgency clawing at his throat. Joan's grip on the pipe tightened as the figure stepped into the light. His sharp features were taut with fury, eyes glinting like blades in the fading moonlight. "No!" Mara screamed, lunging forward again, her body fueled by sheer terror as she shoved Joan down the ladder. "Go!" Joan hesitated, torn between escape and the risk of leaving her friends behind. "Now, Joan!" Stan's voice cracked like a whip, forcing her into action. She scrambled down, each rung a heartbeat they couldn't afford to lose. The figure snarled, shifting focus. He turned toward Mara, eyes filled with relentless fury. She didn't have time to process the fear rushing through her veins. Every instinct screamed at her to get away, but her feet felt stuck to the ground. "Run!" Mara could see the panic in Stannis' eyes as he lunged for her, a tether of desperation anchoring them together even as dread clawed at his throat. But the figure charged, a blur of rage and strength. The sound of heavy boots smashing against the gravel mixed with the shriek of sirens, too close yet too far away. Mara felt the world tilt underfoot, and in a frantic bid to save them all, she darted sideways, using shattered bricks as cover. "Mara!" Stan shouted again, but she couldn't think. The figure was a furious storm approaching fast, his knife glinting wickedly. She could hear the dull thuds of his footsteps echoing like a death toll. Desperation fueled her feet as she raced back towards Stan, fear guiding every step. "We need to hold him off. For just a moment," she yelled, adrenaline coursing through her. From behind, she glimpsed Joan's terrified face peeking from the ladder. "I can't just leave you. Trust us. Go!" Mara screamed, the imperative pouring from her throat. Joan's hesitation broke like glass under pressure. With a sharp nod, she bolted down the ladder, disappearing quickly into the night, her fate unknown. The figure was closer now, and in an instinctive move, Mara grabbed a handful of gravel from the ground, hurling it at him. It struck him square in the face. He recoiled but was not deterred. Instead, A feral anger twisted his features. "Is that all you've got?" he taunted, wiping the gravel away. Stan crouched low, looking for anything to fight back. "We've got to trap him. What do we do?" Mara's mind raced. A vision of escape flashed through her. The rooftops were a dangerous gamble, but what option was left? They couldn't let him reach the edge. A looming danger hung in the air. If he got close enough, he'd have them both. "You take the front. I'll try to flank him." Mara's voice rang sharp, surprising her with its certainty. "No, there's no time. Just trust me." Before Stan could argue, Mara darted away, sprinting toward the other side of the roof. Her heart thundered, limbs heavy with anxiety. Above, the sky echoed with sirens, weaving an unsettling symphony of hope and dread. In a blind rush, she leaped from the edge of one rooftop, landing on a sketchy ledge. She barely had time to breathe, but the figure followed, relentless and merciless. She ducked and rolled, the impact jarring her bones, but she scrambled to her feet. The world spun, but there was no time for weakness. "Mara, to your left," Stan called, his voice a lifeline in the storm. What was that noise? The way he screamed sent chills down her spine as she turned. The figure was now circling, his shadow a pitch-black stain following her every move. A crack sounded, the rooftop shifting underfoot. She felt the ground slip just as the figure lunged. "Mara, get down," Stan warned, but the warning didn't register. And in that heartbeat, the world turned to chaos as the roof crumbled beneath her. Would they be able to survive the destruction, or would the shadows finally swallow what light remained? The sirens closed in, but the answers would come too late. Shadows danced, leaving only questions in their wake. Mara's body plummeted into darkness, the ground giving way beneath her feet like a cruel twist of fate. Gravity gripped her, and for a moment, suspended in the air, she could feel the weight of her choices crashing down. The shriek of sirens blurred into an agonizing roar, but her focus narrowed. A sudden jolt rocked her as she hit a lower roof, not soft, but slightly lower than death. Pain radiated through her left side, but she shoved it away, forcing herself to roll into a crouch. "Mara, are you okay?" Stan's voice cut through her fog. She nodded, though her breath hitched in her throat. "Yeah, but I need." The warning vessel of Stan's voice faded, replaced by the harsh crunch of heavy boots on the gravel above them. The figure peered down, his malevolent face twisted with excitement. "Brave little mouse," he sneered, an edge of depravity coating his words. He stood tall, silhouetted against the moonlight, his blade glinting softly like a star promising devastation. In an instinctive panic, Mara scanned her surroundings. They were stranded on the lower rooftop, the height above her both a blessing and a curse. There was nowhere to run but into the hollow darkness below. She could hear the wind whistling warnings past her ears. It was as if the night itself urged her to flee. "We need to move now," she gasped, scrambling backward. The walls here were crumbling, but cluttered remnants of the abandoned building lay scattered like hope in ruins. "Find something to block him." Stan's eyes darted frantically around, searching for survival cloaked in debris. "Over there," he shouted, pointing to a rusted metal piece, an old sign, caving in on itself, but heavy enough to act as a barrier. "Quick!" Mara gasped, racing toward it, her legs screaming in protest. She grabbed the edge and dragged it closer, the rough metal scoring her palms. Stan joined her, pushing with all his weight. They wedged it against the precarious opening between roofs just as the figure leaped down, his descent chillingly graceful. He glared at them, eyes wild with malice. "You really think you can stop me with that?" The question dripped with mockery, his smile revealing madness beneath. Mara felt a flood of rage in her chest, what little pain she felt fading against the furious heat of survival instinct. "Just watch us," she yelled, every ounce of her being spilling into the words. They shifted their weight, straining against the metal to keep it in place as the figure charged forward. The thud of his steps reverberated through the rooftop, each stomp a rhythm of dread echoing in Mara's heart. Her palms slicked with sweat, she wrestled with doubt. What if this was their final stand? "Stan, we can't hold this. We need to push him back." He nodded, focus tightening as the figure slammed into the metal with a boom that sent vibrations through their bones. The sign trembled against the impact, threatening to give way. On 3-1-2-3, they heaved together with everything they had, their bodies straining, but the figure was formidable. He thrust his weight against the barrier, grinning like a predator ready to feast. A crack echoed through the night, splitting the air with a sobering clarity that could shatter hope in an instant. Mara felt despair bubble underneath her determination. He 1T stop until where the metal groaned, protesting against their push. "We have to come up with a distraction." Stan's voice was strained, but there was a glint of resolve. "Like what?" "I don't know. Something that'll buy us time." The figure pushed harder, determination written in every angle of his body. "What's the matter? You're going to die anyway. Might as well let me speed things up." Mara's mind raced, her throat tightening. She recalled the last thing Joan had been adamant about. A flare, meant for emergencies. "The bag." "What?" Stan panted out, his grip barely holding against the weight. "The delivery bag. The flare's inside. If you can reach it." Stan's voice cracked, but the figure struck again, the barrier shuddering. "Distract him," she yelled, adrenaline surging, and in that moment, she forced herself free, knowing she had to take the risk. "Mara, no." But there was no backing down now as she leaped back toward the edge of the rooftop, eyes locked on the bag half buried in debris. The figure wheeled around, a predator struck by sudden energy. Mara moved, feeling every heartbeat drum a warning as she snatched the bag. "Stay strong," she shouted, and with shaky hands, she yanked out a flare, her breath hitching in her throat. Just as she struck the flare, light erupted in a dazzling spray, illuminating the night. "Look away," she screamed, the glow blindingly vibrant. As the figure shielded his eyes, she'd only have a moment, but would it be enough to turn the tide? Light burst around her, dancing with an urgent promise. Hope flickered like a candle in the storm, but could it shine bright enough to push back the darkness? Time was slipping away, and in that moment the duo had to act swiftly. Would this be their salvation, or would the relentless shadow consume them? Mara's heart pounded in her ears as she lit the flare, its flame bursting to life like a beacon of hope in the encroaching despair. She thrust it forward, the brightness piercing the shadows. The figure recoiled, his face contorting in shock at the sudden light, horror dancing across his features. "No!" he roared, shielding his eyes with one hand as the other gripped the knife tighter, an animal cornered. "Now! Push!" Mara shouted, adrenaline coursing through her veins. Stan seized the moment, channeling every ounce of fear, anger, and determination into one giant heave against the rusted sign. They shoved with all their might, connecting with the figure's weight. The metal groaned but held, a slim barrier against the oncoming storm. The flaring light swallowed the night, casting bizarre shadows across the rooftop. Mara could see the figure spluttering, rage morphing his features into a wild mask. "You think this bright light can save you?" He spat, but she could sense the cracks in his bravado with the flare lit. A surge of courage traveled through her and Stan. Every heartbeat rallied their resolve, despite the overwhelming fear still gnawing at their insides. "We can do this," she shouted, voice strong against the chaos. The figure took a step back, the glow illuminating every detail, the glimmer of his knife, the dark intentions flashing in his eyes. Mara and Stan pushed harder, their combined might translating into a feeling of purpose. They could beat this. They had to. "Help! Help!" Mara screamed into the night, hope threading through her desperation. Just beyond the collision of shadows and light, she could hear the sound of sirens getting closer, filling the air with a potential rescue. The figure faltered, uncertainty creeping in. Stan's determination hardened. "We're not going back." Together, with one more forceful shove, they dislodged the barrier, sending the man barreling backward. For a heart-stopping moment, he teetered at the edge, and Mara's breath caught, time slowing just enough to see the flicker of fear within him. But then came the pivotal moment. As he lunged forward, arms flailing, the figure lost his balance, falling from the roof's edge with a scream that echoed into the night. There was a sickening thud as he vanished into the darkness, swallowed by the shadows that had once claimed him. Mara and Stan stood frozen for a second, the danger sweeping away like high tide pulling back from the shore. Did we? Stan gasped, wide eyes searching hers. Hope and disbelief flickered between them, surging with newfound strength. The wail of sirens pulsed closer, wrapping around them like a warm blanket. It wasn't over yet, but they had kicked the devil back into the night. Staring at Stan, Mara felt the weight of their victory, fragile yet real. "Let us get down," she said, urgency fueling her words. They scrambled down the ladder, heartbeats racing towards safety. The moment they landed, flashing lights erupted in front of them, splashing color across the courtyard, and beckoning them to the world of safety beyond. "Help!" Mara yelled, her voice nearing collapse. Then, she staggered forward as an officer sprinted toward them. "You have to listen. We were attacked. Everyone stay back," the officer barked, eyes flicking around to survey the scene. But Mara saw concern etched across his face as he hurried forward. "Help us," Stan pleaded, his face pale, but strength failing as relief washed over him. "He was going to kill us." "Who?" the officer asked, glancing back toward the alley as if expecting to see a ghost. "The man in black," Mara finally breathed, breathless and trembling. "He had a knife," and suddenly, cries erupted, and another officer was calling for backup. The chaos tangled with an air of disbelief and urgency. The night's horrors were still real as they were whisked away for questioning. Police lights swirling, Mara locked eyes with Stan. They had survived somehow, clutching onto that thread of hope. In the confusion, Joan and Gina appeared, fear on their faces melting into relief. "We thought," Joan began, but Mara rushed forward, enveloping them in a tight hug, all three shaking slightly. "We made it," Mara whispered, feeling the warmth of their unity pulse between them. "We didn't let fear take us. We fought back." As the scene unfolded around them, officers flooded in to gather evidence. Mara took a deep, trembling breath. The memories of the chaos still clawed at her, but somehow they made it through the other side together. And just as the dawn started to break, illuminating the horizon with soft ochres and blues, Mara felt a flicker of renewal, a sense that even amid darkness, they could find light. "We leave the past behind," Mara said as they embraced the new day, knowing they could start fresh, a team forged in fire. The fight they faced had only made them stronger. As they headed toward the warm embrace of first responders and the soft light of dawn, Mara shouted out, "We can't let fear control us. We'll fight," and she meant every word. So there it was, a chapter closing but a new path unfolding, a narrative they could write on their own terms. The shadows would always lurk, but they knew now, together, they could face anything. This was their story and they would rise again. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this crazy ending. And please instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.